There's been obviously a lot of discussion of Katrina of late because of the anniversary. Talk about why you decided to write this particular book with this particular focus on your home state of Mississippi.
John, I thought that the story needed to be told. You know, the news coverage after Katrina 10 years ago just reminded people that the news media doesn't like to cover airplanes that land safely, that where there's a terrible story, a terrible outcome, terrible behavior, that gets all the news coverage. And in Mississippi, you didn't have that. We bore the brunt of the worst natural disaster in American history. Our people got knocked down flat. It was utter obliteration. Yet those strong, resilient, self-reliant people got right back up and hitched up their britches and went to work. Not just helping themselves, but helping their neighbors. That's a story you didn't hear told enough.
Governor, a lot of great stories in the book, lots of ideas about leadership. I want you to just briefly tell one of the stories about a young man, in order to deal with the shortage of currency in the state, who drove to the Federal Reserve in Atlanta.
Well, the largest bank on the coast, Hancock Bank, had been through hurricanes before, and they knew with the storm surge, which was 20-something feet deep at their main bank office, and all their bank's offices were destroyed, flooded, the ATMs didn't work. So they had a boy who was a trainee whose wife lived in Atlanta, and he rode out the storm there. They told him to go by the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta, put something in his trunk or the back of his SUV, and don't stop, drive straight to the bank in Gulfport. Well, when he got there, they had put in the bank $30 million in cash.
That he drove without security.
That's right. They had no idea. All they knew was a big cardboard box in the back. But the bank knew that it would be a cash economy for a while. No electricity for 12 days. You know, you couldn't get anything out of the ATM. Companies wouldn't take a credit card because they couldn't get them processed. And this same bank, by the way, loaned out $3.5 million to people on IOUs signed on a plain white piece of paper. And the comptroller of the currency, the regulators really squealed about it, yet they collected back over 90% of that money, over $3.3 million.
Governor, let me ask you real quick about one of the great perceived villains of this story, which is FEMA. You write about how FEMA got some things right, some things wrong, but you said that they, quote, did a lot more right than wrong. Do you think that FEMA deserves more credit? And for that matter, does George W. Bush deserve more credit for the handling of this crisis than they get 10 years long?
The FEMA logistical system on which all the states down there were relying, had been told to rely on by FEMA, absolutely failed. And it failed from the start. It almost created a catastrophe in our state. We had to work around it. They were criticized for that, deservedly. They did some other things that don't make sense. The federal law, by the way, in places doesn't make sense. But when you look at the totality, FEMA did a whole lot more right than wrong. A whole lot more. And they tried to be good partners. Just the logistical system failed. As far as George Bush is concerned, he leaned forward on every decision. Whatever the federal law said was the maximum he could legally do, every time he did that. But look, people's impressions of that are all baked in. I understand that. But I do hate the fact that people don't recognize generally the federal government was a good partner and gave us in Louisiana, Alabama, and Texas unprecedented assistance, unlike any that had ever been done before for a natural disaster in the United States.